This episode of The Horn is brought to you by Asurian. Hello everyone, welcome back to The Horn Road to the Race with David Starr.
Neil, good to see you again,
Good
sir.
to see you as well, David. Hey, and before we start, just want to thank the sponsors of this episode, Asurian. Now, David, you are the owner of Team Texas High Performance Driving School. Would you like to tell us about the history of the driving school?
Man, Neil, that's a great question. Lots of history. Back in 1988, my uncle Mike Starr, who's my uncle, and myself, my dad, we've been in racing our whole lives, And man, I was racing dirt tracks, and my uncle suggested that we go to Charlotte, North Carolina and go to the fast track driving school based at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, mile-and-a-half racetrack. And I went, I think it was 1989. It was unbelievable, a great experience. And Mike went, my uncle went back the next year. And when he came back to Texas, came back home, he said, "We can do this." I'm like, "We can do what?" He said, "We can have our own racing school." And Neil, it was 2 months later, we were headed back to North Carolina buying race cars. And we started our NASCAR racing school in 1991, I believe it was. And we started at a racetrack in Bryan College Station, Texas, where Texas A&M's located. There's a 2-mile super speedway called Texas World Speedway. And that's where we started our racing school. And it was unbelievable how that process started. We just went to a racing school in Charlotte Motor Speedway, and I went, and then my uncle Mike Starr went a year later, and he came back home and said, "We can do this." And man, did we do it. We did it, and have been doing it ever since 1991. It's amazing.
Excellent. Now, the Charlotte Driving School, were they letting just regular members of the public come in and drive the vehicles, or did they need any kind of training or qualifications first?
That's a great question. If I remember right, and I didn't have any training or any experience, so it was open to the public. And so I was in a class with other people around the country, and we were just normal citizens, fans of the sport. And man, it was, I remember it like it was yesterday, but I thought it was the coolest thing because I wasn't a NASCAR driver back in 1988. I wanted to be, it was my dream, but to go to Charlotte Motor Speedway and put a real racing uniform on and getting a NASCAR race car and drive on the Charlotte Motor Speedway, man, that was a big deal for me. It was amazing. So yeah, it was open to the public, and that was my first experience in NASCAR.
Nice, nice. So when you and Mike were scouting for a place to locate your own driving school, what kind of considerations did you make?
Well, there was not a whole lot of NASCAR racetracks in the state of Texas, and I grew up going to Texas World Speedway. My dad worked on Ronnie Chumley and Tony Bittenhausen's car there at Texas World Speedway.
Yes.
And it was a treat. Ever since I was a little boy, I would go to Texas World Speedway, and you're sitting up in these massive stands, and it's a 2-mile super speedway. It was amazing. I saw A.J. Foyt, Richard Petty, Bobby Allison, Buddy Baker. It was amazing. It just, God, I loved it so much as a kid. And when Mike came back from the fast track racing school based at the Charlotte Motor Speedway and said, "Hey, we can do this." And I'm like, "Let's do it," And once we went and bought our first 2, 3, 4, 5 race cars, he was in contact with Texas World Speedway there in Bryan College Station, Texas, and they said, "Hey, we'd love to have a NASCAR style racing school here." And that was really the only track we could have done at, because there was really no other NASCAR tracks in the state of Texas, So, he made a phone call, we met with them, and they were so, they thought it was a brilliant idea, and that's how it all started, and then boom, I remember having our first school, which was incredible. I think it was 1991, it could have been 1992, but man, it was awesome, and man, the rest after that is history, and all these years later, I want to talk about my uncle Mike Starr. Man, he's a workaholic, and man, he perfected the racing school business, did a great job, and it grew into be what it is today, obviously based at the Texas Motor Speedway here in Fort Worth, Texas, but it's pretty awesome.
So when you both opened that first school, was it them, the Motor Speedway, that gave you the buildings and the place to store the cars, or did you have to rent a place yourself or build from new for that original school?
So in Houston, when we were racing, when we first started, and we were operating at Texas World Speedway, we would trailer our cars to Texas World Speedway in Bryan College Station, which was about an hour northwest of Houston. So our race shops were based in Houston, and then we would trailer all our equipment, everything per event. So when we was fortunate and blessed enough to come up to Fort Worth, Texas, when they built the Texas Motor Speedway, we came up, when I say we, I'm speaking of my uncle, Mike Starr. He came up here to Fort Worth, Texas, and seen where they were building the racetrack. The racetrack wasn't even completed yet. And across the street, Mike bought 3 buildings where we would house our racing cars, work on them, fix them, build the engines, everything we do. And it was right across the street from the Speedway. So how convenient that was. And instead of having that Texas World Speedway, when the first 5 or 6 years of Team Texas assistance, we only had 7 race cars. And then when we moved Team Texas Racing School to the Texas Motor Speedway in Fort Worth, Texas, we ended up owning 35 race cars. So it was amazing. So having a facility right across the street, shops, and where you do all the maintenance and build and repair, it was a convenience thing, and it's worked out great. And Mike built such an awesome racing school. I would just tell you, I hate to tell people that because I want them to tell me that when they come. It's probably the best NASCAR racing school in the country.
I agree, because of course I'm biased and I've experienced driving around the track. But back then in Houston, were the cars still fully NASCARs? Did they still have the NASCAR clutch? Were there any modifications made before regular drivers, regular members of the public could drive these cars?
You know, that's a great question. And then they were the current cars in 1989, 1990, 1991, because when Mike would go back to Charlotte, North Carolina, he would go back to the NASCAR teams that were competing in NASCAR then. And when they wanted to sell one of their current cars that they wasn't going to race anymore, we wanted to buy a car that had been racing. You could come to Team Texas at Texas World Speedway and drive a car that probably raced at Darlington, South Carolina, or Atlanta Motor Speedway. It was a current car that had been racing, and that's one of the things that when we were open to the public and people came and drove our race cars, it's like, man, I probably watched this car on television not too long ago, and you probably did, and that was kind of a cool thing to be able to come to our racing school and drive a real NASCAR race car. And actually, it might have been one you've seen race on television. It was the real deal.
That's got to have been a big draw for people, because they weren't just replicas. They weren't just ordinary cars painted to look like a NASCAR. They were actually real NASCARs that are driven in races.
You know, Neil, that's a good point, because, you know, there's other racing schools around the country that have NASCAR stock car race cars, you know, but they're not the real cars that have been racing competition. They have raced in competition, but maybe not in the NASCAR Cup Series level. But one of the things my uncle did, he went to the racing teams and bought a car that was actually in competition at that level. And he probably spent more money than you needed to spend, but it worked for us. He wanted to have the products of the race cars. He wanted to have the real thing, and boy, did he do a great job at it. We have 35 real NASCAR race cars today that raced in NASCAR Cup racing, and man, and we're proud of that. Not everybody really cares if that car has been on television, it's been in competition, but that's how we wanted our racing school to be. We wanted it to be the real car, the real NASCAR race car, and so that's how we've always done it.
Now, financially, it must have been a big risk for you and Mike to move from Houston up to north of Fort Worth, because there would have been a period when Texas Motor Speedway was being built when you would not be getting revenues into the school. So how did you cope with how did you make the decision on when to relocate?
You know, Neil, that and man, that's and let me just say here, you know, even Mike Starr, my uncle, he's like my brother.
Yes.
But it was all his money.
Okay.
It was all of his money, and Mike had a successful towing company in Houston, Texas. I believe he had 40 tow trucks. He had a big operation, and he sold that off piece by piece to a lot of his employees, and that was how he got the funding to go buy the race cars to start Team Texas. But when he got the call from the Bruton Smith family that they were building a racetrack in Fort Worth, Texas,
Yes.
and Mike made the decision to move the operation of Texas World Speedway to Fort Worth, Texas, to Texas Motor Speedway, brand new speedway. And the Smith family had other racetracks, Bristol Motor Speedway, Charlotte Motor Speedway, Atlanta Motor Speedway. They had other racetracks that NASCAR raced at. So we knew the Texas Motor Speedway was going to be successful. And Mike just made that ultimate commitment, hey, I'm going to go for it. Which was a huge financial commitment, because not knowing how that was, you know, not knowing really what the future was going to look like. So it could have been a disaster financially, but he went, bought more race cars, bought better race cars from the racing teams, hired more people, bought property, bought buildings,
Yes.
and spent a lot of money. And thank God it worked, but it worked because of his hard work and giving the people a real race car to race. And the Texas Motor Speedway is a great partner of Team Texas. Without the Texas Motor Speedway, Team Texas wouldn't be what it is. So Mike did a phenomenal job of building probably the best NASCAR school in the country. Having a partner like the Texas Motor Speedway to have our business at was just unbelievable.
He certainly did. David, I'd like to take a break for just a moment, because we've been asking you, our viewers, to send in your questions for David. So I'm going to ask our producer, Karen, to hand me the list of questions to ask David just now. Thank you, Karen. David, we have a question from another David in Atlanta. Do you have a nickname?
Oh, you know, I probably have a nickname that we can't mention on the horn, but not really. I mean, you know, people call me David. Some people reference me by my last name. They say call me Starr, but I don't really have a nickname. And I like nicknames. I have nicknames for other people, but nobody's ever given me a nickname.
I understand. Thank you. David, our next question is from Juan in Texas. If you were a superhero, what would you want your superpowers to be?
Man, that's awesome. Man, I never even thought about that, you know. I mean, I don't know, you know, you want to be Batman or Superman, I guess, just because those two characters as a kid growing up, they was always helping people, you know what I mean? And if I could, you know, if you had all these superpowers and you could help people, that's what I'd want to, you know, I'd like to be Batman or Superman, that where I could help people get out of situations that probably aren't going to end up well for them.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Juan, for your question. The next question is from Susan from Albuquerque, and the question seems to be for me. I noticed, Neil, that when you're sitting opposite the slim, well-toned and handsome David Starr, you are always holding in your gut. Is it difficult to hold your tummy in for such prolonged periods of time? Do I have to answer this? Oh, no. Yes, it's really hard. Okay, please blacklist Susan from now on. Thank you. So, David, you and Mike in particular, were looking for the location really close to Texas Motor Speedway. And honestly, folks, I mean, it's right across the road. You can see it. So the location's great. Were the three buildings already there?
They were already there. Mike bought the shops. They were already there, and the location was perfect because it was right across the street. The location is so perfect, Neil, that, you know, when you got as many race cars as we have, and we're constantly going back and forth to the racetrack, yes. Our facility, when I say facilities, our shops are right across the street. We drive the race cars back and forth. We actually get on the public road, and we'll put about 6 or 7 of them in a line, and we drive them back to the shop. We don't even trailer them. We're that close to the speedway. So it's kind of cool. And, you know, you're driving a car, make sure, you know, that, you know, you're doing everything right. You don't hit the race car in front of you. and minding all the laws. But it's cool when other cars, they come flying by you and they're videoing you. You know, people think it's kind of cool when they pass a race car on the public streets, but that's how close we are to the Speedway.
Fantastic. So, like just all these years ago in Houston, the cars are still the actual NASCARs. You've not made any changes at all to the gearbox to make them easier for regular drivers to drive?
Well, you know, it's the real deal. It's the real NASCAR. It's like the car I race, you know, on Saturday afternoon. It's a real NASCAR race car. You got to make some modifications to them because, you know, when you let somebody that has no clue what they're doing drive a real race car, like yourself,
Yes.
you have to have you know, you feel more comfortable when you have an instructor sitting on the passenger side. So, you know, we have to put 2 seats. A real race car only has 1 seat.
Yes.
But we have to cut out 2 bars out of the chassis on the passenger side to be able to put another seat in there so you're able to ride with an instructor.
Yes.
An instructor in there is just to make our customers feel comfortable. It's safe, and it's how it's worked, man. We don't really have any crashes in our racing school because you always have an instructor riding with you. And a lot of times you don't even know they're there. If you do everything just perfect, you don't even know they're there. But it's definitely a safety issue if you just put somebody out there on the racetrack that has really no idea what they're doing.
Yes.
And let them go 150, 155 miles an hour.
Yes.
I think we would probably be going back and forth to Charlotte buying more race cars, you know what I mean? So having a passenger seat in there and putting an instructor in there, it really benefits everybody.
Do the people who come in to take the course, the safety course, and then drive the 10 or 20 laps or whatever, do they have to drive that fast?
No, I mean, our racing school's for everybody, you know, and 99.9% of our customers are just people that are fans of the sport, car enthusiasts, gearheads. You know, they don't even really like cars, you know, it's just an experience. It's like jumping out of an airplane, going skydiving, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, I really don't have any, you know, that doesn't really excite me. But I like to try it sometime. I've never done that. Really don't want to do it, but I kind of want to do it.
Yes,
you know what I mean? And that's the same thing with our racing school. People want to come drive a real race car, see what it's like, and you kind of. And I love it when they do that because they have such a different perspective on the sport and the race car drivers at the athletes. You know, they always say, "Man, I have such a different perspective now." It's like, man, I got confused, didn't know what corner I was in, and how can you do that for 4 hours for 400 miles? You know what I mean? They're like, man, it's like, you know, it's just what we do, you know? And they say, man, I have a new respect for the drivers I watch race here at the Texas Motor Speedway or when I'm watching on television. It's not as easy as it looks, you know?
No.
But man, the customers are great, and like I said, 99.9% of the people that come, our customers that come drive our race cars, they're just wanting to see what the experience is like. Some of them love it so much, Neil, they'll come 6 or 7 times a year. It's like, man, it's like, I got to get my racing fix in. Oh, absolutely. People from all over the country. And they'll come 6 or 7 times a year, said, I need my racing fix, you know. So they don't actually race cars, but they come to our racing school and act like a race car driver, and they do that 7, 8, 9 times a year.
I'm reminded when Patrick was sitting to my right as my safety instructor, as it were, he was actually encouraging me to drive faster, which may surprise the audience because, you know, when we drive on the road, we've learned over the years to keep our distance. But actually, the best place to be while going around the track is with the soft wall as close as possible to the right side of the car. So he was actually, you know, tugging, because it's so loud in the car that they can't give you verbal instructions. So yeah, I found that Patrick, you know, kept me safe, but also encouraged me to push myself a little bit more than I would have done had I been by myself.
Man, our instructors are amazing. You know, they want our customers, you know, male or female. We want them to get the ultimate experience. You know, and you know, we want you to go faster. If you know, if you're only comfortable doing 80 miles an hour, that's fine, and that's, you don't need to go any faster. But you know, we want people to reach 150, 155 miles an hour if you want to. You know, and a lot of our instructors, they watch your line and see if you're capable, if you're handling the race car really good, and they'll encourage you because they know that you got it. You understand the line around the racetrack, And just like Patrick was doing, he was trying to encourage you, hey, go faster. We're going to be okay. He's got your back.
Yes.
And it's, hey, if you want to go faster, a lot of people aren't comfortable going faster.
No.
But he was just letting Neil know, hey, it's going to be okay. I got your back here. We're going to be all right. So you can go max this thing out, So that's what he was doing. So, again, if the customers come drive a race car, if they only want to drive 80 miles an hour, we're good with that. But a lot of them can see that you have a good handling on it, you can handle it, and you might not want to get to 150, but they encourage you, and when they encourage you, boom, you're there, you know. So the instructors really make it fun, and we want all our customers, 100% of them, when they get out of the race car, to holler and scream, have a big old smile on their face, because it was a great experience.
It sure is. And I mean, nerves of steel. I mean, I'm up close to the soft wall, but there's Patrick really right beside. He's between me and the soft wall, so he's in the riskier position. So nerves of steel, much respect to them. But for anyone who doesn't wish to go quite that fast, who want to do 85, 100, 120, I've seen that they receive instruction beforehand how to position themselves on the track so the faster ones can pass them nice and safely.
Absolutely. It's all about safety. In racing, safety's everything, Neil. The fans, they want to see fire and wrecks and sparks. But, it's all about, the end of the day, it's all about doing your job 110%, but being safe while you do it. And no different from Team Texas, our racing school. All our customers, one of the things we let everybody know, hey, this is safe. We're going to keep you safe. And if you only want to go 80 miles an hour, you're on the racetrack with other people going 150, 155 miles an hour, but having an instructor in there, and we give instructions before you get on the racetrack. If you only want to go 80 miles an hour, we're going to keep you safe, and we're going to keep the cars going around the racetrack much faster to keep them safe too. So there's a process and the procedures, and the instructors are on top of it. You don't even know that you're going to get past until it just happens and a car comes flying by. And a lot of times once a car going 150 miles an hour passes you and you're going 80, man, a lot of times it's kind of a rabbit. Next thing you know,
it encourages
no doubt about it. But it is a lot of fun, But definitely safe. And our instructors, they make the driving on the race, they make it fun for our customers.
They do. Now, I know that you also run corporate events, and sometimes people want to do something a little bit different. I think you have another couple of vehicles that are not NASCARs in the normal sense of the matter.
Well, we do a lot of corporate events. Companies will bring their employees, entertain them, bring their customers, and just to say thank you for your business. What a better way to say thank you to your customers is to bring them to an event where it's just a fun day. Everybody's having a great time, and you're driving race cars. They're loud, they're fast. And over the years, we do a lot of corporate events, for a lot of different companies. And, companies take their customers and employees, they take them fishing, they take them golfing, they just take them on a vacation somewhere, And I love hearing the customers and the employees tell me, I can't even remember what we did last year, but I'll never forget 4 years ago when we came here for the first time and drove a race car. It was such a memorable moment. I've never forgotten it. And a lot of them buy our videos. We sell a video. We got in-car cameras, and it shows them driving the race car, and it shows out in front of the race car. And they say, we share with all our friends and family members the video. And it's just a great experience, and this is what I hear from our customers. But a lot of corporate events we do, and we also, you talk about different types of cars. We took a race car and cut it in half, and we have a limousine. You can put 12 people in it. And a lot of people, we going down, when limousine's only going to go 50 miles an hour, we stop in the corners so everybody can feel the banking, see how much banking there is. And when the limousine's coming down the front straightaway at 50 miles an hour, everybody's holding their arms up like they're on a roller coaster. But we want to make sure that everybody's having a good time. And when we're open to the public, moms come, dads come, they bring their kids, they bring the grandparents, and a lot of times they got to sit there for 2 or 3 hours. So we got the limousine running so the kids and the grandparents can have some fun too. So we try to engage everybody when they come to a racing school, whether it's a corporate event or we're open to the public.
Fantastic. David, always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me again,
Thank
Neil.
you for being here. And we'll see you next time on The Horn, Road to the Race.